Guys, we have started to already review some of the weapons from the Desert Perpetual Raid. Today though, we are going to be going over what we think are the gun rolls for everything. And this is not a deep dive, but you can treat this as an overview. Here in this year's raid, we have 6 new weapons. Each of these weapons have different tiers, and we've already covered the feed system on how to get higher tiers of these weapons. Now TLDR, essentially tier 5s are going to be locked behind Ash and Iron when we get into the epic raid. So for the time being, you can pretty much only get up to tier 4s. Now let me just say guys, it's a struggle, man. Now before we get into the weapons themselves though, I do want to highlight the armor. I know this is a weapons video, but with the rework to armor and set bonuses, I have to highlight this raid armor set because the bonus is very strong. It comes with the perk Collective Psyche, which is a set bonus with its 2-piece reading that picking up an ammo brick gives you a stacking bonus to weapon swap and stow speeds until you die. Picking up ammo grants stacks of accretion, with special bricks granting 1 and heavy bricks granting 3. This stacks up to 20 times. Now this grants a ready and stow animation duration multiplier per stack, maxing out at 0.8 times at 20 stacks. Now the 4-piece is what's really juice. It reads that suspend, unravel, and sever effects applied to targets and radiant and restoration effects applied to you have increased duration. Now we unfortunately don't have any numbers for just how long these effects get extended. According to community research, solar buffs applied to you and strand debuffs applied to enemies lasts 50% longer. This can also be stacked with Ember of Solace or Thread of Continuity, which makes the effects last 70% longer. Now, interestingly enough, this also goes kind of hand in hand with the Raid Exotic, which is a strand rocket launcher, but also does solar damage. And then on top of that, we have our artifact mods, which are very strand and solar heavy. So needless to say, guys, this armor set is a really good armor set, and one I'm personally going to be locking down for that tier 4, tier 5. Next, I want to take a quick look at the origin trait on these weapons. This is called Frame of Reference. It reads that final blows of this weapon temporarily grants increased damage, reload speed, and range. Now this effect is frozen in time while the weapon is stowed. Each kill grants 1 stack up to a maximum of 5, and it will last for 8 seconds, with the timer being paused whenever you stow the weapon. Now the damage bonus for each stack is as follows. Times 1 is 1.45%, times 2 is 2.8%, times 3 is 4.2%, times 4 is 5.6%, and at times 5, it caps out at 7%. Let me just say, guys, for an origin trait, this is pretty solid. We're talking 7% extra damage. On top of the fact, these weapons are going to be doing more damage anyways, as they're like the seasonal featured weapons. So right out the gate, already looking pretty good. So let's kick things off with our 900 round per minute SMG Antedate. This is an arc adaptive frame, and it drops from Agrario's Inherent, which is the Hobgoblin encounter, as well as the final boss encounter. Now right out the gate, guys, we've got some pretty insane perks. We've got rerun rounds, Dragonfly, Zim Moment, Rolling Storm, Strategist, Auto-Loading Holster, and Rangefinder. In our 4th column, we have Target Lock, Desperate Measures, Master of Arms, Jolting Feedback, Frenzy, Paracosmo Affinity, and To the Pain. Now immediately you may have noticed that Rolling Storm is present in the 3rd column, which is pretty huge. Now many people have said that Rolling Storm just doesn't feel strong enough to be in that 4th column slot, but here you see the pairing combination of both Rolling Storm and Jolting Feedback together, which is some pretty crazy arc synergy. However, I do want to mention that while testing Jolting Feedback, it seemingly isn't counted as ability damage, like volatile rounds or chill clip, meaning that proccing Jolting Feedback won't actually discharge bolt charge stacks, which is like such a crazy oversight. Bungie, this was supposed to be a fantastic combination meant for each other, a means of creating stacks of bolt charge and discharging within the weapon itself. I don't know, guys. I'm just saying, I would love to see that combination actually work out for this role. Is it still a pretty good role? Sure. I think it's still very much a unique combination worth looking out for. I just want that discharge of bolt charge. Now, if you don't want that combination, you of course have rewind rounds, which is going to be a good combo with Jolting Feedback. As considering how fast firing this SMG is, you'll be proccing that jolt alongside reloading the weapon. Now, Dragonfly is also present in that 3rd column, which did just get a buff so that its damage no longer scales based on the weapon type, which means for SMGs, it's actually doing more damage. Now, I wouldn't say that Jolting Feedback is the only perk to go for in that 4th column. You've got things like Frenzy, which is pretty basic, but good. You can also pair it with Dragonfly. You've got Paracosmo Affinity and Master of Arms, giving you that 20 to 25% more damage. And then for my PvP players, I'm not the craziest about 900s, but you can max out the range on this one. I would never go full bore, definitely just Hammer Forge. And that would pick you up to 69 range with something like Ricochet Rounds and a ranged Masterwork. And then either Zim Moment, Target Lock, or maybe Zim Moment, Master of Arms. Again though, I actually have not used this inside of PvP, so I'm not even sure if I would even use this thing, but it does have pretty good stats here for the most part. Moving on on to our next weapon, we have Intercalary, which is a stasis adaptive frame, 600 round per minute auto rifle. Now, can I just say all of these weapons, hot damn are they sexy. Now, this one drops from Agrios Inherent, as well as the Hydra and the final boss. Now, in the third column, we have Headstone, Built to Blast, Demolitionist, Rewind Rounds, Subsistence, Auto-Loading Holster, and Strategist. Bungie, what the hell? Another primary with auto-loading holster? Somebody literally at Bungie was like, yep, we're cooking with this. Put it on there. In our fourth column, we have Rhyme Stiller, Target Lock, Master of Arms, Desperate Measures, One for All, Onslaught, and Binary Orbits. We have 2 new perks on this weapon, so we're gonna break those down real quickly. First is Built to Blast. You gain aim assist, stability, and flinch resistance while you have Woven Mail, Frost Armor, or Void Overshield. Now, this is definitely more of a PvP pick, as those buffs don't really impact much inside of PvE. No one's really caring about aim assist or stability inside of PvE, but inside of PvP, it's definitely something we can easily proc, even if it's something like a Bastion Titan, where you drop our barricade and we give ourselves an overshield. Next is Binary Orbits, which states that elemental Final Blows opposite this weapon increases damage for a short duration. Darkness Final Blows boosts arc, solar, and void weapons. Light Final Blows boost stasis, strand, and kinetic weapons. Now, this provides us a 25% damage increase, which lasts for 8 to 9 seconds when enhanced. An interesting one for sure, especially if you find yourself swapping between weapons. You can make great use of this. Now, I do want to mention that this weapon actually has a unique trait combination, that being Headstone in that third column and One for All in that fourth column. Many weapons have rolled both Headstone and One for All, but across the board, at so many different weapons, whether it's been Appetence, Exuviate, Crate, Perseus D, all of them have One for All and Headstone, but they happen to be in that same column. The reason why it's so interesting on this is because if you proc the Stasis Shard with Headstone, potentially, if those crystals from Headstone hit a group of ants, that should in theory proc One for All. And I feel like Bungie intentionally putting that role in this weapon, they would have to, right? Granted, this all comes down to how the crystal damage is calculated. For instance, on Exalted Truth, which has the stabilizing rounds and One for All, that would not proc it. But as we mentioned before, that does count as ability damage. Headstone crystals seem to count as weapon damage, as you can see here that we can't discharge a bolt charge with its damage. But again, this is going to be something that we're going to have to test, but if you do have this role, definitely let us know down below. Another good option here is combos like Headstone and Rhyme Stiller for that stasis energy. You also have combinations like Reround Rounds and Subsistence paired with things like Onslaught, which is such a good combo. You've got ability regeneration perks like Demolitionist and Strategist. Now, you could just do something as simple as Reround Rounds and One for All. Literally, shoot 3 targets, boom, you've got a 35% increase in damage, and then you've got Reround Rounds feeding back into the weapon itself. I think for my PvP players though, again, high range, high cal ricochet rounds, and I'm gonna go with that Built to Blast alongside Target Lock or Onslaught. That's really what I'm looking for there, and I know we have to build into Built to Blast, but I think it's gonna be worth it, especially with the regeneration that we have for certain abilities right now. You can build into this very easily. For instance, like a high class stat on Titans with Bastion, and just give yourself an overshield going into every gunfight, which simultaneously is gonna give you that aim assist and stability. Now, next we have Opaque Hourglass. This is an arc heavy combat bow, essentially a crossbow, and we've already covered it in great detail. We did an entire review on this weapon. It drops from Apoptes, the Hydra boss, as well as the final boss. Now, if you're really interested in this weapon, we'll have a link down below to that review because there's a lot to talk about with this crossbow. There's so much here that changes with it based on the bolt types, which kind of gives us like a bunch of different versions of this weapon. Now, given a brief overview of its perks though, we've got some pretty interesting combinations. For example, things like Firefly and Dragonfly, which deal both solar and arc damage. You've got Elemental Honing for really pumping up that damage. Vorpal Weapon is currently bugged on it, at least at the time of this recording, and it's doing way more damage, upwards of 32%, when in reality, it's supposed to be just doing 10%. And one of the things that makes this crossbow so unique is that you have the ability to shoot your enemies and then retrieve the bolts themselves, leaning into perks like Bolt Scavenger, which gives you increased reload speed and handling. And again, reload speed is important on bows, and especially on this crossbow here, as it allows you to knock a bolt in faster. A lot of cool stuff on this thing, guys. Check out our review if you wish. Next, we have Lance Ephemeral. This is a strand rapid 140 round per minute sniper rifle. This can drop from Agrarios and Corregos. In the third column, we have Hatchling, 4 times the charm, Envious Arsenal, Lead from Gold, Built to Blast, Snapshot Science, and Reround Rounds. In our fourth column, we have Bait and Switch, Tear, Redirection, Killing Tally, Closing Time, Deconstruct, and Elemental Honing. Now, let me just say, guys, we have some fantastic damage dealing combos here. You've got 4 times the charm, Envious Arsenal, and Rewind Rounds in that third column. Those can be paired primarily with either Bait and Switch, Elemental Honing for that 30 to 35% damage buff. Hell, you even have Deconstruct there, which I know, kind of niche, but that gives you a 40% damage buff when dealing damage to vehicles or constructs. And of course, this does apply to certain enemy types. Now, the damage perk here that really sticks out to us is Redirection. Redirection states that damaging rank and file combatants increases damage against more powerful ones. Essentially, hits against minor combatants grants 2 stacks of Redirection, and it goes up to 30 stacks. Now, Redirection got a buff last season. It actually became one of my most used perks on a number of different weapons. You see, when you hit an elite or higher rank combatants, it consumes 3 stacks of Redirection, each one granting you 33% increase in damage per stack, which means yes, 3 stacks of Redirection, boom, you're doing 100% more damage. But then here's the beautiful thing. If you have Enhanced Redirection, now you only consume 2 stacks, and each one of those stacks gives you 50% increased damage, reaching that cap of 100%, which is beautiful because at 30 stacks, that means you have 15 shots doing 100% more damage. Fellas, that is substantial. Disregard things like killing tally, which is kind of an interesting one to see here. Redirection, in my opinion, is what really makes this sniper rifle special inside of PvE. You combine that with 4 times the charm, which will allow you to create ammo from thin air. You're gonna have a sniper rifle that's gonna do a heavy amount of damage. Now, granted, do you have to build into this? Yes. And you definitely need a means of getting yourself back ammo. But considering how often we use sniper rifles throughout the encounters of the raid, especially in things like Hobgoblin, this is a great sniper to use. And Les actually got a Redirection roll, and it's been popping off from. Now, as far as PvP players go, you've got snapshots and you've got closing time. It's a good combination. I personally don't use this archetype much inside of PvP, but I'm definitely willing to give this one a go. Now, our next weapon on the list is Finite Maybe. This is a solar aggressive frame fusion rifle. Now, remember, these got to change to their spread pattern back in Heresy, and now we know why. Essentially, though, they fire more of a burst, still horizontal rather than vertical like our other fusions. Now, this can drop from Agrarios and Corregos, and in our third column, we have Incandescent, Reconstruction, Under Pressure, Lead from Gold, Demolitionist, Ambitious Assassin, and Hill Club. In our fourth column, we have Discord, Bait and Switch, Controlled Bursts, Desperate Measures, Reservoir Bursts, Successful Warm-Up, and Burning Ambition, which is actually a brand new perk. Burning Ambition reads that dealing sustained damage scorches the target. Dealing damage to a scorched target inflicts Scorch. Now, you can look at this perk like what Jolting Feedback is to Volt Shot and Arc. Burning Ambition is essentially that, but for Incandescent and Solar. Now, as for the rest of the perks, this archetype of fusion is certainly designed to be more ad-clear focused. You can see with the horizontal spread. Now, to lean more into the weapon's strong points, you've got quite a few options. You've got Incandescent, which is a good pick for solar weapons. You could pair that with Reservoir Bursts for even more kabloomies. I personally like Discord a lot, simply because it pretty much gives us infinite ammo as long as we're getting kills. You could do like Discord and Incandescent. Granted, you've got nothing really helping your damage, but it could be a very good ad-clearing fusion. Outside of that, you could double stack with Burning Ambition and Incandescent together, a combination that I would like to see. Definitely a role I would want to test as soon as we get it. Now, I wouldn't choose things like Controlled Bursts or even things like Bait and Switch. Not saying you can utilize those things, but again, this is not really a DPS weapon. You can deal with some high out targets, some champs, and a bunch of ads, and that's kind of what I would lean into. Now, it's not to say you can't do things like Bait and Switch and Incandescent, or hell, even Reservoir Burst and Incandescent. But again, the problem with Reservoir's Burst is that it only works when your battery is full, which is great for perk combinations like Reconstruction, but not really good for Incandescent, as you're really only going to get the damage from that very first shot. So if you want to go Reservoir Burst with Reconstruction, yeah, all day long, guys, that can work for sure. And everything past your base magazine will get that Reservoir Burst damage buff. As for PvP, guys, in my opinion, this fusion rifle archetype is just too inconsistent. Now, this takes us to our final raid weapon, the Win and Wear. This is a stasis adaptive frame rocket launcher. It can be earned from either Latros or Korgos. And by the way, I've just noticed I've been saying every one of these names differently every single time. Y'all let me know if I got it right even once. Now, in the third column, we have Chill Clip, Clown Cartridge, Impulse Amplifier, Field Prep, Overflow, Demolitionist, Reconstruction. In our fourth column, we have Explosive Light, Elemental Honing, Bipod, Desperate Measures, Bait and Switch, Surrounded, and Reaper's Tithe. Now, let me just say, guys, this rocket is stacked with damage perks. But first, we need to go over Reaper's Tithe. It reads that multiple simultaneous final blows queue up a stacking damage buff. The timer starts on next weapon fire. Final blows extends this timer. Now, this equates to a 20% buff at 1 stack, a 30% buff at 2 stacks, and a 40% buff at 3, which is the max. Now, this is interesting because this actually is now the highest damage bonus on a rocket launcher, outside of like Surrounded or Enhanced Surrounded, which is definitely a lot more situational. Now, this, of course, does have some setup involved because you need kills on a big group of ads to actually actually get to max stacks for that 40% buff. But this will also stack with the origin traits, which pauses when the weapon is stowed, meaning you could get both the 7% damage buff and the 40% damage buff on top of it. It's not very plausible, I know. Definitely a lot of hoops to jump through, and to be honest with you guys, I don't really know how easy it's gonna be to carry this in most damage phases for an entire team. With that being said though, Reaper's Tithe does last for 15 seconds, which is fairly long. So similar to Surrounded, definitely situational, but if you can optimize, I'm sure it will put out. But we also have Elemental Honing and Bait and Switch. Good standard damage traits that put out a lot of damage. Hezin's Vengeance has Elemental Honing and literally is the best rocket in the game. Same concept here. I think the thing that really makes this rocket launcher so interesting though is that in that third column, we've got Chill Clip. You see, Chill Clip has always been present in the fourth column for rocket launchers, which does make this weapon extremely unique. You've got the direct hits with the top half of the magazine, causing a detonation that slows nearby targets. If you remember back in the day, having one person with like Bump in the Night and Chill Clip was good because it threw in some extra shatter damage. Now, this doesn't help you in the other areas, like for instance, blowing your load with Reconstruction or even Overflow or Clown Cartridge with the damage perk is definitely easier. This is just one of those situations where if Chill Clip is in fact really good with our damage perks, you could be throwing in some shatter damage alongside doing pretty good damage yourself with the rocket and those damage perks. Definitely a combo, guys, that I need to test myself. Will this outclass Hezin's Vengeance? No, but to be quite honest with you, that's not what I see the Win and Wear trying to do. It's trying to give you that utility option while also still being pretty decent at damage. We'll see how it plays out, guys. And again, like many of these weapons, we will be individually reviewing all of them. Let me know in the comments below which one you would like to see from us first. I'll be targeting as many roles as I can over these next few weeks to really dial in on the combos that really stand out. For the time being though, guys, we do have a review up for the crossbow, so feel free to check that one out. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.